Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So I'm very happy to be back and meet all of you after more than a month. Next time I shall try to avoid skipping these classes and try to do this class wherever I go. I mean, I can do it online everywhere. But this time I had a very hectic tour in different places in India. So that's also full of lectures and programs. So I'm now continuing this discussion on RāMANUJA'S philosophy. Now, most of you who have been listening to these classes, by now you may know that the most important aspect of RāMANUJA'S philosophy of religion is a kind of theology of philosophy of religion, is unique concept of this total self-surrender. This is very interesting. Though the idea of surrender is found in Advaita system also, and also in the succeeding schools of Vedanta, in the teachings of the great philosophers of Vaishnava tradition who followed RāMANUJA'S tradition. Directly or indirectly, they were following the footsteps of RāMANUJA. Nimbarka, Vallabha, Chaitanya, and of course Madhvacharya himself, they were, one way or other, they were all following the path of RāMANUJA one way or other in their insistence on devotion. So this unique concept of surrender, in a way you find this in different ways, in different traditions. In some traditions, this surrender is a kind of slavery, spiritual slavery. That's a very important thing, but not in RāMANUJA system. In RāMANUJA system, as they call it, Viśiṣṭādvaita, means we are all one with God in a conditioned sense, not in the absolute sense. That's why Viśiṣṭādvaita. It is conditioned, Advaita conditioned. What is the conditioning factor? The conditioning factor is, in one respect, there is an identity and similarity between different living beings and God, but in another aspect, there is absolute difference. So, there is the divine spark, the presence of the divine, the presence of God in all of us, but still it is it's a kind of conditioned identity. So, and we realize this truth only through self-surrender, which we call Sharanagati. That is Nikshepa Aparapadhyayo Nyasa Panchanga Samyutaka. So Nyasa Panchanga Samyutaka. So Panchanga means 5 elements, 5 factors, which constitute this Nyasa. Nyasa means giving up everything. And it consists of 5 elements. Sannyasas Tyaga Ityukta Sharanagati Ityapi. So it is called Tyaga or Sannyasa, which he develops into a unique system of philosophy called Sharanagati or Prapatti, as it is more frequently called. Now, there is a great difference between this Prapatti and devotion. In devotion, you have to follow certain practices, certain methods you have to follow. See, you have to study scriptures, then you have to follow certain rituals, and you have to follow certain disciplines in devotional practice. In all traditions you can find. You have to follow certain disciplines. I mean, you have to get up in the morning. If you are a Vaishnava devotee, you have to practice certain rituals, puja, you have to read Parayanam, you have to read devotional books, as you find in the great religious traditions of Judaism and Christianity. There is a systematic practice of devotion. You go to a church or a synagogue, or if you are a Buddhist, you go to a Buddhist place and you practice devotion. If you are a Hindu, you go to a temple, you do pilgrimages, you read scriptures. All these constitute different disciplines, obligatory disciplines that every devotee of God has to practice. Now, when a spiritual seeker reaches a state of total helplessness, when he realizes that he is totally incapable of doing any of this, or he has exhausted all his resources in trying to practice all these ordained disciplines and rituals. So, for example, of course, there are many examples, but the most classic example that is often quoted by Viśiṣṭādvaita and also some other devotional schools is an interesting story in the Bhagavata Purana. It is called Gajendra Moksha Ubakhyana, Gajendra Ubakhyana. Gajendra means a big elephant. How an elephant practiced this, there's a story. Of course, there is a story behind the story. Once upon a time, in ancient times, there was a great devotee, must be a king or a sage, and he was certainly a great, sincere devotee, but he committed some mistake, some blunder. And as a result, he had to be born as an elephant. This story goes. But the elephant retained all his previous samskaras, tendencies. That elephant had practiced. The elephant, as a human being, in his previous life, he was a great devotee. As a human being, when he was living in his previous life, he had practiced a lot of spiritual disciplines. But somewhere there was a great mistake. Maybe he did not show respect in an assembly of sages, though he stayed dumb without doing anything. Anyway, so what happened, and as a result of this sinful act, what happened? He had to be born as an elephant. But the elephant retained all his memories. And one day this elephant enters a lake or a river, and the crocodile catches him. And there's a big fight going on. In the end, the elephant becomes totally exhausted. It was about to be dragged into the waters, the lake, by the crocodile. That means it was facing imminent death. At that time, he remembered an ancient mantra, a prayer that he used to recite and practice in his spiritual discipline in some previous life. At that time, the mantra came back to his mind, and he uttered this mantra, and he took a lotus leaf, a lotus flower from the lake, and mentally offered to the feet of the Lord. At that time, Vishnu appeared and liberated this elephant, killed the crocodile and liberated this elephant. This is a story. The story goes beyond that. The crocodile also was a good saint who had committed some terrible mistake. He had to be born as a crocodile. So when Vishnu came, both of them got liberation. The story goes. So actually, if you follow the story, you can get the spiritual psychology of self-surrender behind this idea of prapatti or sharanagati. Means you should be totally in a state of absolute helplessness. You should feel you are a complete destitute, totally incapable of doing anything, absolutely incapable of going to church on Sundays, reading the Bible if you are a Christian, going to synagogue on the days you want, but your mind doesn't permit, or you are in a set of circumstances, you are totally helpless. It doesn't mean that your road is blocked. There is one quick hotline. What is a hotline? Surrender. So when you do this surrender, what happens is, your responsibility is transferred to God Himself. So, but then this surrender happens only once in your lifetime. It's like the end of a bargain. You don't argue further. So, that's why the most important aspect of this surrender is called karpanyam. Karpanyam. So, of course, there are two important principles, akinjanyam and ananyagaditvam. This is RāMāNUJā'S own vocabulary, or the vocabulary used in RāMāNUJā's system of philosophy. I mean, you have nothing else. You can't do anything. You don't have the power to. You want to pray, but your mind doesn't permit you to pray. You want to do some good, noble deed. Your body doesn't permit you. You want to do good things, but your mind is full of negative thoughts. So still the road is not, the journey is not over. You can still a hotline. What's a hotline? Prapatti. Atma Nikshepa. And this, so, here you find it is in a well-known book by Vedanta Deshika, who was a great interpreter of RāMāNUJā'S books. He has written a well-known book, Rahasyatrayasara. Rahasyatrayasara. It's also mentioned Lakshmi Tantram, another alternative book. So, here also mentioned this. That is Nyasa Panjanga Samyutaha. This total surrender is called Atma Nikshepa, mean surrendering, offering oneself. That is why the well-known sloka is Anugullisya Sankalpaka Pradigullisya Varjanam Rakshasiddhi Viśiṣṭādvaita Goptrutta Varanam Tadha Atma Nikshepa Karpanne Shadvidha Sharanagati. This is the, I'm reciting this quotation because it is a standard practice to recite this when you discuss the subject. So, Karpanyam, total helplessness, and Atma Niksheba, as a result of that feeling of absolute helplessness, you surrender yourself to God. And then what happens? It is like a hotline. You don't have to wait for the connection, that is instant connection. So that's why inability to perform all those rituals and spiritual disciplines. And then, as a result of this, you feel you have nothing and you don't have any other resource, you have no one else to depend upon, and you totally surrender yourself. You find this Prapatti ideal in many of the teachings of the mystics. No doubt about it. You find that in the writings of the mystics of medieval Europe, we find. It may not be so systematically articulated as a definite system of philosophy, but idea that when you feel you are totally helpless, you are at the end of all your resources, you surrender yourself to God. And then what happens is, from that moment onwards, you become a tool in the hands of a higher power. So that is why such a person reaches instant goal. But then it is possible only if the devotee is fully convinced that God is the only savior. Goptrutta Varana means Gopta, means the savior, the protector. God is only protector. So you fill your mind with all positive thoughts conducive to the development of this Prapatti, and you remove all negative thought currents, Anugullisya Sankalpaha and Pratigullisya Varjanam, and then God will protect me. Rakshasiddhi Viśiṣṭādvaita Goptrutta Varana. God is only protector. Atma Nikshepa Karpanya. Karpanya is very important. Karpanya is a state It's a psychological state. Karpanya can be a blessing for somebody who can practice prapatti or sharanagati. Karpanya also leads to terrible, tragic consequences in the life of many spiritual seekers who are not aware of this. And another important aspect of this prapatti or sharanagati is you don't even need any knowledge of scriptures. All that you need is a pure, sincere heart. There are many stories of people who had no knowledge of scriptures, who could not study any of the classical works, but a total dependence, a sense of dependence on God, and who are not even capable of doing any karma yoga. Because for normal people, they should practice karma yoga, puja, Sabbath, confession, depending upon your tradition, and then reading scriptures every day, praying, all these you need. But here you don't have to do anything. But then it is not due to laziness. Rather, you have exhausted all of your own resources, and you have found the limitation of your own powers. And you are convinced that absolutely, at the end of the day, God is the only deciding factor. So, that's why this prapatti or sharanagati is considered to be a hotline for moksha or liberation. Now, so these are two different, devotion and prapatti. Devotion and surrender. Sometimes surrender comes at the end of our efforts to practice devotional disciplines, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, etc. Sometimes in certain Puranic mythological characters you find, they had many great qualities, but they could not regulate their life in a way, in an organized way. Because to practice bhakti yoga and karma yoga, or any traditional spiritual discipline, here you should have a respectable level of mental discipline. And you should be able to follow certain routine. And you should also do certain things, and you should make sure that you don't do certain things. But if you practice this prapatti, you are freed from all these obligations. Because your own personality is taken over by a much higher power, so that your conviction that you are a tool in the hands of a higher power, you yourself don't have anything else, that conviction gives you a tremendous strength and ability to do great things. So many of the great men who have done great things in spiritual traditions, religious traditions, they must have practiced this prapatti. Because without prapatti, you cannot go beyond the level of human resources. Doing good things I'm talking about. Whether you are Christ or Buddha or anyone for that matter, unless they have transcended their own empirical personality and placed themselves in the hands of a nominal, of a spiritual, universal spiritual power through prapatti, they won't be able to do things which normally human beings cannot do. That's why the two important disciplines are akinjanyam and ananya gaditvam. These are two important points, remember. And when you do this, what happens is, you practice Swarupa-tyaga and Phala-tyaga. You completely dedicate your own personality to a higher power, your actions and so their results, and then you give the responsibility for your own protection, your own welfare to a higher power. The surrender of all responsibility is called bharanyasa. Now remember, I have to say a few things. That's a problem with traditional religion. Now, if you compare the prapatti ideal, that is explained in these scriptures with the organized, highly mechanical system that prevails at the community level, there is a great difference. That is true. See, it's on, for example, according to Augustine, if you are really confessing, every confession is the beginning of a new life, it's a birth of a new person, and every confession, actually an act of confession is actually a rebirth of the soul. Similarly, if you really surrender yourself to God, then you are being spiritually reborn. That doesn't happen, and that's because the whole system becomes a highly organized mechanical practice. So that's the main problem. When a spiritual discipline becomes a mechanical practice, it kills its spiritual element in it. That's a very important thing to remember. So Ramanuja insists that prapatti can directly take you to moksha. It's a very important thing to remember. There are two ways of interpreting this prapatti. One, it can happen at the end of all your efforts to practice bhakti yoga, or in certain cases, in the life of certain personalities, it could be some kind of a sudden transformation. Maybe the life of Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Paul, in some ways Saint Augustine, and innumerable examples you find in Vedantic tradition. So many saints and sages, they started a new life. So this is an important contribution of Ramanuja towards bhakti philosophy. Now, and another very important thing that I discussed earlier was this. And Ramanuja says that a devotee can pray for prapatti. And not only that, prapatti can ensure the fulfillment of all their desires that a devotee is asking for, praying for. One may ask this question. If you really become a prapanna, somebody who has done prapatti or self-surrender, then you don't have any more desire. That's the reality. Poor Ramanuja says, as in fact in the Gita, artho jijñāsu artharthi jnani. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna divides spiritual seekers or devotees into four categories. Those who are turning to spirituality from a state of total helplessness, sickness, or any of this. Or sometimes they need certain things they are not getting, praying to God for fulfilling their desires. Or out of curiosity, out of knowledge. So that is jijñāsu. And also those who have reached spiritual realization, the four levels. So Ramanuja says, and this is a very important aspect of Ramanuja philosophy. Suppose a devotee has some desires, worldly desires, so to speak, wealth or long life or whatever it is, and he prays to God with a sense of feeling, well, total prapatti. I have no one else to turn to. That is ananyagaditvam and akinchanyam. I have nothing else that I can think of. When you reach, you feel a total helplessness. And great sincerity, one may pray to God. When he has no money, he can pray for money. He has no education, he can pray for education. Remember, there is nothing wrong if a poor man prays to God for money. So when I mentioned this in one of the classes, some devotees had a serious conflict. They said Swami Vivekananda came to Dakshineshwar, and Sri Ramakrishna, he had some problems in family. Swamiji's mother, he was coming from a fluent family, but his father passed away, so the family got into trouble. So he had some financial difficulties at home. So Swamiji used to worry about it, and Sri Ramakrishna Swamiji's guru knew about it. So Sri Ramakrishna asked, all right, if you are so much worried about your family troubles, why don't you pray to Divine Mother? Ask Mother, Mother will provide everything. So Swamiji went to the temple, Dakshineshwar temple. But he could not pray to Divine Mother for any financial help, worldly help. When he reached the deity, he could only pray for knowledge, renunciation, devotion, great things. So some people ask me, so why can we actually pray to God for money? Suppose you are sick, you pray to God for recovery from your illness. Is it wrong? Vivekananda did not do that. So the answer is, a Vivekananda may not ask for that. But an average spiritual seeker, nothing wrong in asking. Why? Because instead of knocking at so many other doors, you are knocking at the door of God for your help. So this is a very important principle in spiritual life. Everyone should not and cannot follow the example of a highly exalted spiritual teacher like Vivekananda, who could not pray for any empirical worldly needs. Sri Ramakrishna also could not pray for anything other than devotion and spiritual realization, nothing else. But for the ordinary spiritual seekers in the world, that's why Lord Krishna says, Arthaha, Jignasu, Artharthi, Jnani. Artharthi is a person, literally, it means somebody who is praying to God, somebody is seeking for the fulfillment of what he wants. Artha means some tool, instrument. So you are looking for money if you are poor. If you are looking for health if you are sick, nothing wrong in it. And the Ramanuja says, if you pray to God for the fulfillment of your worldly needs with all sincerity, with a sense of total self-surrender, then what happens? You get a promotion. Suppose a sincere spiritual seeker prays with all sincerity for recovery from physical illness or from want of money or anything, or even if you don't have a job, you are praying to God for helping you to get a job. It's okay, because you are not praying to some undesirable personalities or resources. You are praying to God himself, compassionate. So you will get your prayers answered. And then, out of a sense of gratitude to God who has fulfilled your desires, you continue the same prayer. And then you will start praying without expecting anything in return. It's a graduation from one level to another higher level in spiritual life. That's why Ramanuja says one can always pray. That's why Prapatti gives a person dharma, artha, kama and moksha. That's why Ramanuja says. So, that's why he says, Tavadartis tada vancha, tavan mokas tatha sukham. That's what he says. What it means is, if a person really prays for certain things, God will certainly answer and fulfill those desires. And then there are certain other gradual evolution in the Prapatti ideal. One is Surupa Samarpana, Bhara Samarpana and Phala Samarpana. That means Kartrutvam, Bhoktrutvam, Mamada, Phalatyaga, Phalopayatyaga. The 5 types of renunciation. It's a very exalted idea of renouncing everything, dedicating everything to the feet of the Lord. It's an important thing. One should always remember that Ramanuja is not asking that everyone should practice this Prapatti. is outlining this idea. Those who have got a lot of determination, resources, intelligence, and have done their best, and still find that something is not clicking, it's not really happening. So you feel a kind of helplessness. So at that time, RāMānuja says there's a higher path. Actually, real prapatti cannot happen to any person who has not tried other resources. Because to feel that you are totally helpless, in spite of your efforts, you should have already made your own efforts, your own sincere efforts. Then only you will sincerely feel that your efforts alone are not enough. So the real karpanya comes only when you have exhausted all of your own resources. Then what happens is kartrutva tyaga comes. Kartrutva tyaga means tyaga of kartrutva. I cannot do anything. And also, I cannot be the enjoyer of any of my action. And also, whatever you do, you don't care for the result. Everything you dedicate to God. And phalopaya tyaga means you even give up looking for any means for producing the results through any of these actions. So, of course, in this context, again, there is a well-known book by Vedanta. It's called Nyasa Deshakam, 10 verses, which are exclusively focused on different aspects of the spiritual psychology of self-surrender. I mentioned at the very beginning, the self-surrender is a simple, easy hotline for those who are very, very sincere. But to reach that level of sincerity, for prapatti to be really effective, one should sincerely feel that his own efforts are absolutely inadequate. And for that, he should have made his own efforts, which means you must have already practiced karma yoga, bhakti yoga, etc. That's why in the commentary on the 66th verse of the 18th chapter, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam praja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. This is the promise from God according to RāMānuja. It is actually a statement of prapatti, saranagati. Sarva dharman parityajya. So if you look at any literal translation, one may be misled. Giving up all dharma. What Lord Krishna means is, suppose you are a spiritual seeker, you try to practice karma yoga, do everything with a sense of dedication, offering to God your actions and the result with great sincerity. But again, desire may spring up in the mind. Our own mind may deceive us. So at heart we feel we are not sincere to ourselves. We are not able to practice real karma yoga. And in bhakti yoga also one may practice sincere dedication. Because in every human effort, there is always a possibility of a human error. That's why you find a disclaimer in many of the rituals at the end. If I jagrasana sushuptyavastasu manasa vaja karmana hastabhyam, etc. In my puja or in my prayer, in my meditation, mentally, physically or verbally, I may have made some errors. Please forgive me, I leave it, I dedicate, I offer everything to God. Through that offering of everything to God, Brahmarpanam, you are actually it's kind of disclaimer. You are praying for being relieved of the negative consequences of any any error, any mistake in the performance of rituals, because it's a psychological fact that no ritual can be truly perfect. You may go to a temple or place of worship or synagogue or Buddhist place or Hindu temple, perform a ritual, puja, whatever it is. It will be absolutely effective. Your mind, your word, your thought, everything should be focused on that idea, which is literally impossible. It's not possible, except for the most exalted spiritual seekers. You can find in Sri Ramakrishna's life, Swami Brahmanandaji's life and all that. Those who highly exalted, highly evolved spiritual teachers, they can focus their mind, their thoughts, emotions, feeling, everything on whatever they are doing, the prayer or meditation, whatever it is. Others, mind for a split second may be diverted to something else. So it is an error, it's a mistake. So manasa vacha karmana. Mentally, you should be fully focused so that no other thought or emotions and feelings should enter the mind, which is technically very difficult for any ordinary seeker. And also what you are offering, maybe a modern Safeways or Trader Joe's, it may not be of the best quality. You buy flowers, you buy fruits. So one fruit may be rotten, a flower may be dry or what. In Hindu pujas, the Vidya leaf and Tulasi leaf, many of them are broken and dry. So you cannot get perfect leaves. Or also in any tradition, also any other tradition, the incense sticks may not be of the best quality. So all these, that means no karma, no ritual can be really perfect, 100%. Up to 99.9% it can be. So it is an error. So that's why in all rituals there is a disclaimer. If there is some problem, please excuse me. That's the idea behind. So a kind of helplessness is always part of any sincere prayer system in any tradition. So that's why this prapatti, the prapatti ideal purifies and completes and perfects all spiritual disciplines. If a person has fully dedicated himself to God, then any unconscious act of error or mistake will not have any negative consequences. So that is why prapatti is always very, very important in any kind of spiritual discipline. That's why Lord Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam vaja. Dharman here means all activities, all efforts in the direction of practicing karma yoga and bhakti yoga. All that you dedicate to me. That means self-surrender. And then I shall save you. Like that is this is the promise that you find in the 66th chapter. It's very prominent, very important for RāMāNUJA system. That is it's one of their important prayers, one of the important statements. So that's why in the Nyasa Deshakam, Vedanta Desika mentioned, Aham madrakshana bharo, madrakshana phalam tatha, na mama sipade eva ityatmanam nikshipet dhudha. So, you see, I don't have any responsibility for my own protection. It is your responsibility. And also, the effect, the result, everything is your responsibility. Na mama sipade eva. Na mama kindu sipade eva. It's not mine. It is, everything belongs to Vishnu, Lakshmi, or Vishnu. That is RāMāNUJA'S idea of the ultimate monotheistic God, Vishnu, Vasudeva, Sriman Narayana, etc. Iti atmanam nikshipet. So thinking this, na mama sipate. Everything belongs to the Lord, to God. It is not mine. So, and then with this strong conviction, iti atmanam nikshipet. One should surrender, dedicate oneself to the Lord. Swamin Susesham Suvasham Subharatvena Nirbharam Sudatta Sudhiya Swartham Susmin Sanyasi Mam Soyam. So, I am dedicating everything to yourself. So, by with full consciousness. So, the word aham, namama, susesham, etc. You mean, see, all these words are used. The jivatman, sesha exists for the satisfaction of the Supreme. So, anyway, the point is, phalam tatha namama. That means, this protection, the rakshana phala is also. I mean, the effect, the benefit of this protection also belongs to God. I think that is Surupatyaga and Phalatyaga. So Bharanyasa and Raksha Bharanyasa. All these are very, very important ideals of RāMāNUJA system of Prapatti. It's a very, very unique system. As I mentioned earlier, even the concept of Prapatti, which actually gave a new life to many spiritual seekers. Even India, the what you call the most ancient poetical classical work in Sanskrit language is Adhikavya. It's called Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki himself was a robber. His name was Ratnakara. He was a robber living in a forest. There are many examples, but in Bhagavata Purana, Gajendra Moksha is, but here in Valmiki Ramayana, Valmiki himself was a robber, a literate robber. So he lived by robbing, by doing terrible things in society. And once it so happened, by mistake, he happened to rob or tried to rob a few sages who were going on a pilgrimage. And they saw this man, he was apparently a bully, but a cruel monster-like human being. So they asked him, why are you indulging in these terrible things, terrible activities, robbing innocent people? He said he is doing it for his livelihood. Then they asked him, whom do you want to protect in your life? Whom are you protecting? For whose sake are you doing all this? So he said he has your family, he had his parents and wife and children, and he's engaging in this kind of terrible activities, robbing people to provide livelihood for his family members. But then they asked him, do you know that by doing all this, you will have to suffer in your future? You will go to hell, Naraka in Sanskrit. So by doing all this, you are committing terrible sins. Do you think that those for whom you are indulging all these terrible deeds, they will share in your suffering from the consequences of your evil deeds? He said, no, I don't know. But then the sages asked him, go to your home, go to your home and ask your relatives, your children and others that you are bringing food for them, you are getting a livelihood by robbing. Are you going to share in my sins? Are you going to partake a share of my own sufferings when I die? He went and asked, and his parents and his wife, others told him, no, we are not responsible. You are the householder. It's your duty to bring your livelihood. How you managed to do that is none of our concern. So this fellow was shocked, and he came back and fell at the feet of the sages. He realized that he was indulging in all these terrible evil deeds, but he alone will have to pay the price for it. So he requested them to give some mantra, some spiritual instruction. So they gave him a mantra. It's called Rama mantra. But the fellow was so evil that his bad samskaras won't permit him to recite the name of Rama mantra. So they put him upside down, Mara, that he could pronounce, not Rama mantra. Because when your mind is so polluted, you cannot utter a sacred name. Anyway, the story goes like that, and he continued reciting this mantra, Rama mantra, for many years. After several years, so he just returned and they found him in a different shape. He had become a great sage, he had become an enlightened saint, and he was the one who wrote Valmiki Ramayanam, that's the original work depicting the life of Lord Rama. So this is an example, spiritual transformation. There are many such stories in Christian tradition. As I mentioned earlier, Saint Francis of Assisi, he was a soldier. Saint Augustine, many you find. Suddenly they get a spiritual awakening. But for that awakening, the person should be sincere, true to his spirit. A diplomat cannot undergo a spiritual transformation. Only sincere spiritual seeker. Okay, the raw sincerity is an important factor. So that's why this prapatti works in their cases. It means once for all, you close the bargain. No more argument. Once a person does that, his mind, his emotions, his feelings all start functioning at a different level. They become purified by the constant thought that he has dedicated himself to a higher spiritual power. So, in fact, this is a very, very important teaching in RāMāNUJā'S system, this concept of prapatti. One may get prapatti as a result of bhakti or devotion, or those who have no bhakti at all, the sudden transformation can also give a person this prapatti ideal. Complete. You can find, of course, this spiritual psychology behind the same in Advaita. In the Gaudapada Karika, there is a well-known statement, Anadi Maya Supto Yedha Jiva Prabhuddhite Ajam Anidram Asupnam Advaitam Vidyate Tatha. Another kind of spiritual awakening, opening the eyes, spiritual eyes, is mentioned in the Gaudapada Karika. So, a soul, an individual who have been spiritually asleep, suddenly he gets instruction on Advaita Vedanta. All this world, all empirical things are just transient, the impermanent. There is only one absolute reality, that is Atman, that is the true nature. But that requires a much more highly evolved kind of intellect to understand. But prapatti can happen to anyone. Prapatti can happen to anyone. All that requires is complete and total surrender. But that complete total surrender requires extreme sincerity, can happen only if samskaras, impressions, emotions are at a higher level. Then only one may close the bargain once for all. You don't argue any longer after you perform prapatti. And prapatti or sharanagati or self-surrender you practice only once in your life. No second time. That is itself the beginning of a new life. And the old samskaras are just completely washed away. Because the total, complete faith that I am now starting a new life. The strength of the conviction washes away all the negative samskaras and negative currents, negative vrittis, vasanas, everything will be burnt away, will be washed away, and you become a new person. This is a very unique concept in RāMāNUJā'S system. It has been articulated in different ways, in different religious traditions, but RāMāNUJā developed this into a very wonderful spiritual philosophical doctrine. That is his great contribution. So thank you. Now we will have interaction. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you.
Sri Ram's hand is up first.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So you mentioned Nyasa. You said this. Nyasa, sannyasa we understand to be renunciation.
Yeah.
But often we practice Nyasa as a preliminary step in puja. do Karanyasa, Anganyasa, Lagunyasa, Mahanyasa.
Yeah. It's totally different. It's
Can
totally.
you give some perspective on it?
See, nyasa, the word nyasa comes from the dhadu, nis dhadu, means tyagi. So, some is a prefix. That some prefix makes it all comprehensive. Samnyasa means nyasa, which is all comprehensive renunciation. So here, the word nyasa is used in the sense of atma samarpanam, self-surrender to God, not sannyasa. And it's an important thing. All those who practice this Bharanyasa, all this in RāMāNUJā system, they are not sannyasins. Sannyasa is a spiritual institution taking vows in monastic life. This is totally different. This is a way of surrendering our destiny, our life and everything to higher power. For that, in the RāMāNUJā system, there is a ritual, there is a way of doing all this. But the spiritual essence of it is Atma Niksheva, means surrendering oneself completely to the will of the Lord. It is not a ritual.
What about in puja we have preliminary step, we do nyasa.
Yeah, it is only purificatory ceremony. Purificatory ceremony. All the Pancha Mahabhutas and your entire personality is purified. It is not. It's called nyasa. But the same word implies many things in Sanskrit language, Karanyasa, Anganyasa and all that. So Kara means hands, fingers. Anganya different parts of the body. So they are being purified as the beginning of puja ritual, which is part of ritual. This is a much higher thing, where you dedicate your entire life, not only your hands, Karanyasa, Anganyasa, no. Your whole life, your whole destiny, whatever you have done, whatever you are doing, whatever you might do in future, all that you dedicate to the Lord with a sense of total helplessness in your own resources. You are fully convinced that you alone cannot do anything. That state of helplessness, it completely overturns our life, and that's the beginning of a new life in the life of anyone. That's another thing. The more sincere we are in doing that, the more effect it will be. That's all. So all the what you call spiritual transformation, many people highlight that. The problem is, Augustinian doctrine and dogmas of God and sin, all those things given a very bad name to God. But RāMāNUJA's God is so wonderful, so all compromising, so all accommodating, like a father. So you couldn't cry in the parable. If you look at the prodigal son. It's a great parable. It's absolutely wonderful parable. But Augustine will have nothing to do with that. Augustinian God is a bit less compromising, less accommodating, It's a thing. So this is the real idea that emerges from the parables of Jesus Christ, or Sermon on the Mount. That, the prodigal son is an important example, but RāMāNUJA developed it into a very unique, spiritually, a very wonderful system of philosophy. He's explaining the dynamics of spiritual transformation that happens to people. He made it some kind of an institution. So when you give it an institutional mechanism, an institutional infrastructure, what happens is sometimes the outer shell alone may remain, the inner spirit may be lost. That could happen, and that happens in all traditions. It's not his fault. Okay. Yeah.
Maharaj, C. Gopinath, please.
Yeah.
Swamiji, can you briefly share with us about your travels, where you went and what you did?
No, I think Actually I was invited to give some classes to our monks of the order on Advaita Vedanta, on some bhashyas, Shankara bhashya. That's my primary purpose. Along with that, I have to give some lectures in different cities of India, Delhi, Bangalore, and elsewhere. That's all. For one important thing that I am very happy about is I could pay visit to Ayodhya, a pilgrimage to Ayodhya, which is something very unique, Just think of, when you think of Ayodhya, to think of Jerusalem, which was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, the Macedonians, just imagine. And rebuilding the temple, a holy place. There's something like that, Ayodhya. Ayodhya is an ancient city of Rama, almost 5000, 6000 BC. But there was an ancient temple which was destroyed in the 16th century. And it was rebuilt recently. Now it has become a flourishing spiritual place. It attracts crowds not only from India, from different parts of the world, especially from countries where Ramayana story is very popular, like Indonesia, Cambodia, all this, Korea, Vietnam, all those countries. So that's one thing, but again, nothing else to speak about except my pilgrimage to Ayodhya, which is a very sacred place. Yeah.
And were you able to be at the Belur Math for the change in the leadership of the...
I think that need not be part of our discussion of Ramanuja philosophy. Anyway, I know I was present in Chennai when Gautamaji Maharaj was being given a farewell, but that need not be part of our discussion, Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That.
Thank you. David, number 1.
Yeah, please, David. Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Both Davids. Yeah, both of you. Thank you. Yeah.
I had a question in regards property, however you say it,
Yeah.
is the Ramakrishna story about where he says the guru does everything for the disciple.
Yeah.
But at the end he makes him work a little. Is that? Could you explain that in the light of the prapati?
Yeah, Sri Ramakrishna, actually this is not the right episode demonstrating the spiritual significance of prapati in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. On the other hand, Sri Ramakrishna's interaction with Girichandra Ghosh is a classic example. That's a wonderful example. You can see many such examples in Christian tradition. I think I mentioned in this context, I mentioned the example of Joseph, Saint Joseph, the Italian saint. He's called Giuseppe, was born in Cupertino in Italy. An absolutely illiterate, semi-illiterate priest who was forced to be a priest by his own mother. He didn't want to be one, Franciscan, but he became a highly enlightened priest without any knowledge, total dedication to. In his case, he became a devotee of Virgin Mary. You can find in his life. In the case of Sri Ramakrishna and Girichandra Ghosh, it's very interesting. Girichandra Ghosh was basically was a very indisciplined person. Absolutely no discipline, no routine. He was given very bad habits like drinking and so on, alcoholism. And he was a brilliant writer of plays in Bengali literature. He was supposed to be the father of Bengali theatre. So this man, he had one advantage, that means he was absolutely sincere. So very sincere about his own drinking habits, openly. So one day he came to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna was in an exalted mood. So he thought Sri Ramakrishna had drunk something very wonderful. Because that was the kind of man he was. He could not associate spiritual ecstasy of Sri Ramakrishna with anything else. He was so much given to drinking and alcoholism. But what happened when he went there, he found there was something absolutely great about Sri Ramakrishna. He felt a strange, inexplicable attraction. He went to Sri Ramakrishna and asked for some advice. Sri Ramakrishna knew he was given to alcoholism, and he admitted that. Sri Ramakrishna first asked him to take the name of God once in your life before going to bed. He said no, because he never knew when he was going to sleep. And could be morning, evening? No. He said no, he can't do that. So Sri Ramakrishna understood he was a very sincere person. He was not willing to agree to do something which he knew he won't be able to do. So he had the sincerity. So Sri Ramakrishna told him, well, in that case you give your entire responsibility to me. And he didn't know its real significance, and he did that with all sincerity. But later on, he could not drink, because when he tried to drink, he suddenly remembered he had given his own spiritual responsibility for his own spiritual welfare to his Guru Sri Ramakrishna. So he could not do that. Slowly, it so happened that he could not do anything wrong. He actually became a saintly person. Eventually became a saint. So, but there you find one important element. Girichandra Ghosh was fully aware of his own total helplessness. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "Could you take the name of God once in your life? Once in your day?" No, he said. So, he was ready to admit his own helplessness. That's called karpanya. And when you realize your own total helplessness, at the same time you are also fired with this idea of need for a change in your life, and your own inability to bring about that change, and your strong faith that somebody else can really do that, God in this context. So all this combined together brought about this prapatti. Prapatti can also happen slowly. That also should be kept in mind. So the idea that whatever we do, there's a limit to the success we can aspire for. Whatever we may do, there's a limit beyond which we cannot succeed. In real life, we observe, we find, even the best of, the most perfect of organizers and leaders could not always succeed in what they wanted to succeed. Of course, there are many examples. Think of Napoleon Bonaparte and what happened. It rained the previous day in Waterloo. As a result, the French cavalry could not move. And that was the end of the day for Napoleon. You imagine. Think of it. He was apparently the most wonderful military tactician, strategician of his time, when Duke Wellington himself admitted. But that great Napoleon had to face this problem. The previous night it rained in Waterloo and the battle was lost. In history you find this, Genghis Khan's life, everyone you find. Hitler was a brilliant man, but there was something within him that brought about his own downfall. You can find. So people who can mechanically achieve very high level of perfection, sometimes it doesn't, 2 plus 2 doesn't become 4 all the time. It becomes something else. There is an inexplicable unknown factor that decides human destiny. Otherwise, we'll become machines. Actually, all the great things that mankind could do was because of this inherent possibility of failure. In spite of all best efforts, 2 plus 2 don't add up 4. It becomes something else. There's an unknown deciding factor. Otherwise, there will be no mysticism, no science and technology. If we could always predetermine what is going to happen tomorrow, human life will be unbearable. It won't be worth living, actually. So you can find, but this idea, this reality, is not an idea, it's a reality that human efforts, even the best of human efforts, cannot absolutely guarantee success all the time. It's a fact, a physically verifiable fact. This is actually elevated to a level of a spiritual philosophy by Ramanuja. Ramanuja's greatness was he developed into a great doctrine. It was recognized and realized by the great mystics, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Francis of Assisi, take anyone for that matter, in any tradition for that matter. They all understood this. But Ramanuja built up a huge edifice of spiritual philosophy on the foundation of this unknown deciding factor. I hope you agree with me. If we can always predetermine everything that is going to happen tomorrow, life will be absolutely worthless. No one will care for music or mysticism or spirituality or even science. Because why should we make exploration to nature if we can do everything what we want? So we'll be, there's a word we use, maybe Z-O-M-B, Yeah, it's like we become morons or machines. So Ramanuja's greatness was he developed a great spiritual philosophy out of this. The simple fact of real life. Yeah.
So most of us then are not like Girish, where we can suddenly get power of attorney. Most of us have to do the gradual prapatti. Is that?
Exactly. Yeah, actually, that's true. We realize our own inadequacies gradually, but we may not realize our total helplessness. If we realize that, we become saints. But so, as you said, most of us may gradually evolve into this higher prapatti. And without some kind of a prapatti ideal, if you don't mind, in you, you won't spend 1.5 hours watching this this very maybe very dry academic, slightly boring discussion on this philosophy, which you can imagine people, there is no entertainment here. But you watch it because you find there is something really great in it, because it speaks of some undeniable truths.
Swami, it's not boring at all.
No, jokingly, I'm using a part of rhetoric I'm using. But the point is, so actually, we take great interest in great music, great elevating art forms, philosophical ideas, only because somewhere we realize that all these wonderful, attractive things of this world have their limitations. That's why we are looking for something higher, transcendental. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
It's great. Thanks, David. And now, David, also number one.
Yeah, David, yeah.
Please, David.
Please go ahead, yeah.
Thank you, David, Bobby. Swami, it's very comforting and rings true to me, the idea of that God controls everything and that we should consider ourselves instruments of God and to consider oneself an instrument of God. Yeah. But at the same time that you mentioned that, I heard the word laziness, because the counter reaction for me is, well, that would just turn me into a fatalist, and I would just stop trying to do things because I'm an instrument. How is that navigated?
You mean, where do you draw the line between fatalism and this prapatti idea? In short, that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, no, really, fatalism will leave you without any sense of responsibility, without any sense of obligation. Prapatti is different. Prapatti originates from the conviction that there is a higher power, and the higher power can resolve many of the problems that we are not able to resolve in spite of our best efforts. So fatalism is like a dead wall in front of us. Fatalism is so it's so negative in its effect. So here you find, to give an example, great spiritual teachers who actually practice prapatti, this self-surrender, they were great men and women of action. They did not believe in destiny, or if at all they believed in destiny, they considered that destiny as part of that higher divine power, not fate as we understand it. The word fatalism is an extremely negative in its consequences. So here, prapatti is an active spiritual principle. When you do prapatti, you feel you are elevated to a higher level. You are linked to something much higher, something that is transcendental. That's an important thing. Prapatti elevates you by connecting you to something transcendental. So that is the spiritual significance of prapatti. I can give the example, the builder of this temple where I am giving these classes, Swami Tirunathidananda, is a great example. He was a man who had surrendered prapatti completely. And what all great things he did within a short life. I mean, he lived only for less than 13 years in this city. Did all the great things. So, many of the great things were accomplished by men and women who had practiced prapatti. Prapatti connects you to the transcendental. So you are linked to an endless reservoir of energy, spiritual energy. It's just almost like a thin stream is linked to a huge lake, and that stream never gets dried up. But if it is not linked to if it is not connected to the lake, there will be no water during summer season. But if it is connected to the lake, it never gets dried up, it's full of water all the time, then even the thin stream becomes perennial waters, using the language of, I think, perennial philosophy, a perennial ideal, actually, it becomes a source of perennial energy, I said. That's what happens when a person practices prapatti. I have a feeling this prapatti ideal historically, the first great example historically, again, because mythology is older than history, Hindu mythology is much older, but historically maybe Jesus Christ must have been a great example of this prapatti ideal. An average ordinary carpenter, a Galilean carpenter, suddenly became a world teacher because the thin stream was linked to the perennial waters of gods. That's it. He was a Jewish rabbi, and he continues to be one. So, the greatest Jewish teacher the world has ever produced. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Sanjay.
Namaste, Maharaj.
Yeah.
So my question is around different ways people reach prapatti. So my observation today is you talked about Gajendra Moksha, where the elephant was helpless, and finally, and I grew up, and there are only exceptions like Sri Girish Chandra Ghosh and Tattwamayanandaji, where they just saw Swami, Sri Ramakrishna, and they had that desire. But my question is the pain and helplessness, is it the true awakening of, is it the awakening for true spirituality or the higher level of
no, that's true. Here, the Karpanyam is there are 5 Panchanga Samyutaha, mean 5 auxiliary factors and 1 main factor. The main factor is Atmanikshepa. And there are 5 factors of which Karpanyam is the most important, mean total helplessness. Now remember here, when you use this word in English language, being a destitute or state of helplessness, it doesn't indicate a state of misery, feeling wretched, feeling down, not that. You become aware of your limitations and also you become aware of a higher power that you can look up to as a solution to all your problems. That's why it's mentioned, Anugulyasya sankalpaka pradikulyasya varjanam drashtasridhi vishwasa goptukta varanatadha atma nikshepa karpanne shadvidha sharanagati. So atma nikshepa is the most important, surrendering, dedicating oneself to the higher power. That happens only when you feel total helplessness. But along with that helplessness, you also feel that God is the one Gopta, the one supreme source of help and spiritual enlightenment. You also feel that the urge for connecting yourself with that supreme power. So this helplessness or karpanya mentioned here it doesn't indicate a sense of misery or wretchedness or being completely down, not in that sense. That's an important thing to remember. So, in a way, without this, the other aspects, like Goptukta Varanam, God is only protector, Rakshasiddhi Vishwasa, God will protect you. All these combined along with this Karpanya, total helplessness. It's an important thing. Otherwise, we feel totally miserable, not at all. So, it is not a state of misery, a state of search for something higher and transcendental. And there is a great joy in realizing the limitation of all that is worldly and empirical, and also looking actively for something transcendental with full conviction that that is something you have to attain. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
The question I have, I'm going to jump in a second.
Yeah.
There are so many stories about our great sage historical figures facing these bleak prospects. The author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Vyasa is mentioned in this category, and also Viśiṣṭā himself, supposedly saved by circumstances, and so it just comes up again and again, and it seems as though it's a great remedy for something inherent in the human condition that becomes daunting and is either succumbed to or not. And most of the spiritual traditions recommend not succumbing to it by suicide. That's absolutely not encouraged. But the way out of it is illustrated by all of these biographical stories, and also not just philosophical treatises, but also by chants and poems. In your survey of the literature, it occurred to me that there are as many poems as there are sutras and philosophical treatises.
Yeah.
And so it just seems as though this is hardwired into the spiritual landscape.
Yeah.
Is that?
That's true. That's true. So I think the implication is in this property ideal is even if a person feels that his own efforts do not take him anywhere, there is no room for him for disappointment. Rather, that is a golden opportunity for him to go to the next level of spiritual evolution by connecting himself from the empirical to the transcendental. It doesn't mean that this state of being a destitute is absolutely necessary for spiritual, and not at all. Absolutely no. But the point is, Ramanuja happened to develop this theory partly because of his own circumstances. So you can find Ramanuja, during Ramanuja's time, he was studying Advaita Vedanta from Yadav Prakasha. And he was totally disappointed because Yadav Prakasha was not actually very correct in his interpretation of Shankaracharya's philosophy. He was totally mistaken. That's very obvious from his own. He has written some books from which very clear his philosophy was different from Shankaracharya. So Ramanuja actually turned to another teacher, to one or two other teachers in the temple of Chidambaram. That's a famous temple, Vaishnu temple. So I think then he was asked to practice Kainkaryam in the temple, that Vishnu temple. Kainkaryam means doing service in the temple, bringing water for Abhisheka, for different activities in the temple. So he started practicing this seva, service, the temple rituals and all that. And then he himself, of course, gradually he learned his own system of philosophy from different teachers. Also by reading not only Sanskrit books but also the old Tamil saints' works called Alvars, the Tamil Vaishnava saints. So his importance the importance that gave to this Prapatti ideal has something to do with his own spiritual development. I think that's frequently the case. In Augustine, for example. Augustine, sinfulness, the ideal of sin became so important in Christianity, and it did so much of disservice to Christianity as a spiritual doctrine. This happens sometimes. In the case of Ramanuja, he on the other hand developed this self-surrender ideal to a higher spiritual path. So you find many great teachers, whether Augustine or Ramanuja, some of their own development, historical development, their own life also play an important role in the evolution of their thought systems.
I see.
Shankaracharya also used the word Gadistum, Tamega, oh mother, you are the only source. Shankaracharya wrote so many wonderful Sanskrit poetic masterpieces in Sanskrit, all extolling this self-surrender, but did not develop into this system of philosophy. Because Advaita doesn't deny the role of Sharanagati or Prapatti or self-surrender in spiritual life. It has its own role. But Ramanuja developed into such a prominent doctrine partly because of his own, as you mentioned, the landscape, spiritual landscape of his own progress and development as a devotee. But it's totally wrong to say that that one should be in a state of total helplessness to spiritually grow. Absolutely no. Totally, it's just the opposite of truth. Absolutely. Ramanuja takes up that ideal, and it's certainly a great contribution of Ramanuja to system. Yeah.
I see what you mean. No, better not to look for trouble, but if it's,
yeah, if somebody,
there's a way out.
Yeah. No, actually, there are many distortions in this ideal, especially in Russian tradition. There has been some doctrines which insist that you should be a horrible person and hit the rock bottom for you to gradually evolve to higher level. To deserve God's mercy, you should be completely downtrodden, totally lost. Because it's something like saying, you should be prodigal son means you should take your own share of the property, you should destroy everything, you squander your own wealth, and you become totally destitute and live a wayward life, then only your father will receive you, get affection. Absolutely stupid too, if you interpret that way. The prodigal son, his message is different. Because even if he loses everything, the father accepts his own son. He doesn't drive him out of the home. That's the idea behind. The father doesn't reject his son, even if the son has disobeyed him, squandered his own property, lived as he liked. still the Father accepts him. Like God accepts you even if you make a few mistakes. But to deserve God's mercy, you should do sufficient number of mistakes. And that's absolutely stupid to say that. There are people who interpret it that way. Unfortunately, there are some denominations in the Christianity also who should you be sufficiently evil person to deserve God's mercy. Absolutely horrible. That is the opposite of, I think, the real teachings of Jesus. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Maharaj. We're just past 7:30, but David has his hand up. I don't know if it's short or long. David?
Yeah. David, David must,
Swami, it's very short. I just realized that in Alcoholics Anonymous, which was influenced by William James, who of course was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, the doctrine of self-surrender is very prominent in the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step tradition. I just wonder if that it's an interesting and effective technique in their system.
No, actually, if you can really practice this self-surrender, it can work, miracles. But everyone cannot do that because they surrender every day. It's something like you issue a check today and you can take back the check from the other person and again you issue another check. So sometimes people, just license renewal, So that doesn't work. That's why our mind may not always reach that higher level of total sincerity and willingness to really surrender, though we may make a proclamation of it. I mentioned this earlier, when it becomes an institutional mechanism, as it frequently happens, it doesn't really work. Even in spiritual life, it doesn't work. Because if it really works, you'll be a Grishandra Ghosh, a saint, or Valmiki, the great saint, from a robber to a saint. So that doesn't happen to everyone. So that's why I mentioned frequently it may be by slow stages that one may evolve to higher level of sincerity, which is necessary for real self-surrender. Okay, thank you for the wonderful questions and discussion. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Okay, Namaskar.
Recording stopped.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes, thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Prajwal. Thank you back.